All right, welcome to Lesson 2 of Trauma-Informed Care. Hope you enjoyed Lesson 1. Hope something that you got something valuable out of. This one is going to focus, as you can tell from the reading assignments here, the mental health diagnoses that are in the DSM-5. We're going to go over each one of these. These reading assignments are going to be things you're going to need to dig into in terms of understanding each aspect of each diagnosis. We'll talk a little bit about the process of diagnosing and things that people may want to be aware of as you diagnose. Now, along the way as we go through these lessons, I'm going to be dropping some tidbits, a little tidbit here, a little tidbit there, a little bit of information here in preparation for the quizzes at the end of each module that I discussed in Lesson 1. So remember, after Lesson 3, you're going to have a quiz. After Lesson 6, you're going to have a quiz. And after Lesson 9 will be the final exam. You need to pay attention to the details that we go over in not only the lessons, but the reading assignments. So the lectures are important because we're going to cover a lot of good information in there. This, to me, is this is the emotion. This is why we do what we do. We do this as counselors because we have a passion for helping people. And trauma-informed care is one of really it's a building block from a counselor perspective to be better equipped and capable of helping the clients that we deal with. I think, again, from what we discussed in Lesson 1, we've all have our own ideas, and probably the vast majority, if not every single one of us, has experienced some form of trauma and maybe multiple traumatic events. We'll discuss that as we go through the lessons as well. Off and on, there'll be actually a lesson where we're going to focus on counselor resiliency, and we mentioned a little bit about that in Lesson 1 as well. So some of the little tidbits I'm going to drop today are regarding the quiz that we're going to be facing. So the things that you're going to want to be aware of as we progress through this process are things that are going to help you in terms of getting through the quiz. Things to know, things to focus on. You're definitely going to want to know about trauma care and trauma-informed care in general. You're going to want to know things about folks who go through trauma and what may help them, what may be sticking points for them. You're definitely going to want to know more about, again, what we're going to cover today, which are the diagnoses or the mental health diagnoses that are out there as well for folks who have mental health issues as a result of trauma. So there's a couple of just little tidbits there. I'm actually going to try and keep the lecture piece shorter than it was last time. I'm getting some some information from others saying, hey, keep your lectures shorter. People don't pay attention. They lose focus. Well, I try to be engaging. I can only be so engaging. I'm not putting up pictures of myself, or I'm not going to sit there and record my mouth. I'm not a very attractive person to look at. When you don't really want to see me when you're listening to a lecture of mine. You're not missing anything there is what I'm saying. But I do want to keep this engaging as we go through this, okay? So you can see here on Lesson 1, you've got the reading assignments there. Then you've got discussion topics. So discussion topic 1, discuss how someone who experiences trauma may wind up with a mental health diagnosis or abuse or become addicted to substances, legal or illegal. Again, what I'm looking for here is your insight. What happens to people who experience trauma? What can occur to someone and lead to a mental health diagnosis? How does someone become addicted to substances or abuse substances? Those types of things. I'm really interested in your thoughts in our discussion boards. Topic number 2, after reviewing the reading assignments, so go through each one of these reading assignments in detail. Talk about at least one of the trauma disorders and your opinion on how it affects someone with that diagnosis. So again, I'm looking for what you think. Tell me about what you think, your logical diagnosis in terms of, or understanding of the diagnosis and how it may affect someone, how someone who experiences trauma may go through changes and wind up with that diagnosis. All right, we're going to get ready to rock and roll here with the next slide. So here are all the disorders we'll be discussing in this lesson. Reactive attachment disorder, disinhibited social engagement disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, otherwise known as PTSD, acute stress disorder, adjustment disorders, other specified trauma-related and stressor-related disorders, and unspecified trauma and stressor-related disorders. Now, one thing that will really help you guys as you go through this, one is, of course, clicking on these links or using the reading assignments. Each one, the reason I'm using so many different websites is to give you an idea that there are really a lot of resources out there to dig into, not only disorders and mental health diagnoses, etc., but really trauma in general has a lot of resources available that are out there on the internet. And I want you to be familiar with some of them. So that's why there's a variety of them out there. If any of you have invested already in a DSM-5, then you're a step ahead as well, because obviously the DSM-5 is going to have every little tiny tidbit and little pinpoint symptom, etc., in there related to each of these disorders. Okay, so we'll be talking about, we're probably going to discuss each one in significant depth, and that's where we're going to keep this lecture piece a little shorter, but you're going to have to spend some significant time really researching these on your own, and so to inform yourself on these, all right? So the first two disorders we're looking at are childhood trauma disorders, reactive attachment disorder and disinhibited social engagement disorder. You're going to want to look at these websites to find out all the sticky details of them. Reactive attachment disorder, this is something where the child is just not bonding. And that's an overstatement. It's an oversimplification of it. But I want you to look at that website. In fact, I'm going to read a couple things out of it. There are some from the DSM-5. Okay, there's some diagnostic criteria there. If you're looking at it right now along with me, you're going to see there's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. These are all criteria that must be met to satisfy that diagnosis. So when you look at, say, like A, consistent pattern of inhibited, emotionally withdrawn behavior toward adult caregivers. Again, this is a reactive attachment disorder. The child is not developing healthy attachment to their caregiver, parent or other adult. B, persistent social and emotional disturbance characterized by at least two of the following, and it gives what those are. C, the child has experienced a pattern of extremes of insufficient care as evidenced by, and then at least some of the following. And it goes on from there. There are rule outs in there. That's what E is all about. The disturbance must be evident before age of 5, but the child must also meet a developmental age of at least 9 months. So we have trauma-related behavioral health diagnoses that can occur prior to the age of 6 and others that can occur after the age of 6. And of course, we'll talk more about those as well. So this is the first one, just reactive attachment disorder. The next one is disinhibited social engagement disorder. And again, there's a website there you can take a look at. I'm not going to beat this one up either, but this is a little bit different from reactive attachment disorder in that disinhibited social engagement is, I'll give you an example here. You're at the store with your child, and your child disappears. Not that that's ever happened to any of us, right? And then by the time you find your child, you see that your child is engaged in conversation with another adult. If this occurs with some regularity, then there's some fear, obviously, that can occur on the part of the parent, because we're worried about our kids being abducted, our kids being taken, etc. But from a child's perspective, the child is clearly far more familiar. They are not worried. They're not stressed about being with other adults. So again, this is disinhibited social engagement. So it begins in childhood again. There are clear patterns there that you would look at as part of someone that you're going to diagnose. So the child rarely actively approaches, interacts with unfamiliar adults. The children is exhibiting an impulsivity that is not otherwise connected to, say, like ADHD or something along those lines. And there's some other criteria there as well. So here's the first two trauma disorders that we've looked at: reactive attachment disorder and disinhibited social engagement disorder. Now I'm going to stop this recording. We're going to do a couple of other shorter, briefer ones here. So if you need a break, this is a good time for a break.